Chapter in the Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 6, The Journey from Platform 9 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun. True, Dudley was now so scared of him he wouldn't stay in the same room as Harry, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry in his cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it was empty. Although this was an improvement in many ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. He kept to his room with his new owl for company. He decided to call her Hedwig, a name he had found in a history of magic. His schoolbooks were very interesting. He lay on his bed reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the window as she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come into Hoover anymore, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. Every night, before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on the piece of paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September the 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station. The next day, so we went down to the living room where they were watching a quiz show on television. He cleared his throat and let them know he was here, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room. Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening. I need to be at King's Cross Station tomorrow to go to Hogwarts. Uncle Vernon grunted again. Would it be all right if you gave me a lift? Grunt. Harry supposed that meant yes. Thank you. He was about to go upstairs when Uncle Vernon spoke. Funny way to get to a wizard's school, the train. Magic carpets got a lot of punctures, have they? Harry didn't say anything. Where's the school anyway? I don't know, he said, realizing for the first time. He pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket. I just take the train from platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock. His aunt and uncle stared. Platform what? 9 3/4. Don't talk rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. There's no platform 9 3/4. It's on my ticket. Barking, said Uncle Vernon, howling mad at the lot of them. You'll see. You just wait. We'll take you to King's Cross. We're going out to London anyway, or I wouldn't bother. Why are you going to London? Said Harry, trying to keep things friendly. Taking Dudley to hospital, said Uncle Vernon. Got to get that tail removed before he goes to Smeltings. Harry woke at 5 o'clock the next morning and was too excited and nervous to go back to sleep. He got up and pulled on his jeans, because he didn't want to walk to the train station in his wizard's robes. He'd change on the train. He checked the Hogwarts list again, just to make sure he had everything he needed. He saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage and paced the room, waiting for the Dursleys to get up. 2 hours later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dursleys' car. Aunt Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and they set off. They reached King's Cross Station at 10:30. Uncle Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a trolley and wheeled it to the station for him. Harry thought this was strangely kind until Uncle Vernon stopped dead, facing the platforms with a nasty grin on his face. Well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they? He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform, and a big plastic 10 over the one next to it, and in the middle, nothing at all. Have a good turn, said Uncle Vernon with an even nastier smile, and left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. All 3 of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went rather dry. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to stop and ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but didn't dare mention the platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was in. He started to get annoyed, as though Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, Harry asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said there wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about time wasters. Harry was now trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock on the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts. He had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could hardly lift, a pocket full of wizard money, and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something he had to do, like tapping the 3rd brick on the left to get into Diagon Alley. He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping the ticket box between platform 9 and 10. At that moment, a group of people passed just behind him and caught a few words of what they were saying. Packed with muggles, of course. Harry swung around. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each one of them was pushing a trunk, like Harry's, in front of them. They had an owl. Harry's heart hammered. Harry pushed his trolley after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying. "Now, what's the platform number?" said the boy's mother. 9 3/4, piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her mum's hand. "Mum, I can't go." "You're not? Can't I go?" "You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet." "All right, Percy, you go first." What looked like the oldest boy marched towards the platforms 9 and 10. Harry watched, careful not to blink in case he missed it. But just as the boy reached the divide between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time the last rucksack had cleared away, the boy had vanished. "Fred, you next," the plump woman said. "I'm not Fred, I'm George," said the boy. "Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George?" "Sorry, George dear." "Only joking. I am Fred," said the boy, and off he went. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done, because a second later he was gone. How had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly towards the barrier. He was almost there, and then quite suddenly he wasn't anywhere. There was nothing else for it. "Excuse me," he said to the plump one. "Hello, dear. First time at Hogwarts?" "Ron's new too." She pointed at the youngest of her sons. He was tall, thin, gangly, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. "Yes, thing is, I don't know how to get onto the platform," she said kindly, and Harry nodded. "Not to worry," she said. "All you have to do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop, and don't be scared you'll crash into it. That's very important. Best to do it at a run if you're nervous. Go on now. Go before Ron." Okay," said Harry. He pushed his trolley round and stared at the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People jostled him on their way to platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into that ticket box, and he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his trolley, he broke into a heavy run, the barrier coming nearer and nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop. The trolley was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. It didn't come. He kept on running. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam train was waiting on a platform next to, packed with people. An overhead sign said Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the ticket box had been, with the platforms 9 3/4, with the words "Platform 9 3/4" on it. He had done it. Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every colour wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to each other in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the window to talk to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his trolley off down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying, "Gran, I've lost my toad." "Oh, Neville," he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. "Give us a look, Lee. Go on." The boy lifted the lid of a box with his arms, and the people around him shrieked and yelled as something poked out a long, hairy leg. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hedwig inside first and started to shove and heave his trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice dropped it painfully on his foot. "Want a hand?" said one of the red-haired boys he had followed through the ticket box. "Yes, please," Harry panted. "Oi, Fred, come here and help." With the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. "Thanks," said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes. "What's that?" said one of the twins suddenly, pointing at Harry's lightning scar. "Blimey," said the other twin. "Are you—" "He is," said the first twin. "Aren't you?" he added to Harry. "What?" "Harry Potter," chorused the twins. "Oh, him," said Harry. "Yes, I am." The 2 boys gulped at him, and Harry felt himself going red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating through the train's open door. Fred, George, you there? Coming, Mum. With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window where, half hidden, he could watch the red-headed family on the platform and hear what they were saying. Their mother had just taken out a handkerchief. Ron, you've got something on your nose. The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him, beginning rubbing the end of his nose. Mom, get off! He wriggled free. Ah, has Ickle Ronnie got something on his nose? Said one of the twins. Shut up, said Ron. Where's Percy? Said their mother. He's coming now. The oldest boy came striding in sight. He had already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. Can't stay long, Mum. I'm up front. With the prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves. Oh, you're a prefect, Percy, said one of the twins, with an air of great surprise. You should have said something. We had no idea. Hang on. I think I remember you saying something about it, said the other twin. Once. Or twice. A minute. All summer. Oh, shut up, said Percy the prefect. How come Percy gets new robes anyway? Said one of the twins. Because he's a prefect, said his mother fondly. All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an owl when you get there. She kissed Percy on the cheek and left. Then she turned to the twins. Now you two, this year behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet, or... Blown up a toilet? We've never done that. It's a great idea, though. Thanks, Mum. It's not funny. And look after Ron. Don't worry. Ickle Ronnykins was safe with us. Shut up, said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins, and his nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it. Hey, Mum, guess what? Guess who we met on the train? Harry leant back so quickly so they couldn't see him looking. You know that black-haired boy who was near us at the station? Know who he is? Who? Harry Potter. Harry heard the little girl's voice. Oh, Mum, can I go on the train and see him? Oh, Mum, please. You've already seen him, Ginny. The poor boy isn't something you goggle at the zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know? Asked him. Saw his scar. It's really there, like lightning. Poor dear. No wonder he was alone. I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get onto the platform. Never mind that. Do you think he remembers who looks like? Their mother became very stern. I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs reminding of that on his first day at school. All right, keep your hair on. The whistle sounded. Hurry up, said their mother. The 3 boys clambered on the train, and they leant out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and their younger sister began to cry. Don't worry, Ginny. We'll send you lots of owls. We'll send you a Hogwarts seat. George, only joking, Mum. And the train began to move. Harry saw the boys' mother waving, and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and her mother disappear as the train ran to the corner. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sitting here? He asked, pointing at the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry, then looked quickly out of the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose. Hey, Ron, the twins are back. Listen, we're going to the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there. Right, mumbled Ron. Harry, said the other twin, did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. This is our brother, Ron. See you later, then. Bye, said Ron and Harry. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, I thought it might have been, one of Fred and George's jokes. Have you really got, He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back its fringe to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. Is that where you know who? Yes, but I can't remember it, said Harry. Nothing, said Ron eagerly. Well, I remember a flash of green light, but nothing else. Wow, Ron said. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments. Then, as though he had suddenly realised what he was doing, he looked back out the windows. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who had found Ron just as interesting as Ron had found him. Yes, I think so, said Ron. I think Mum's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never really talk about him. You must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys are clearly one of those old wizarding families pale boy in Diagon Alley who talked about. I heard you went to live with Muggles, said Ron. What were they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. I wish I had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason, he was looking gloomily. I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie left already. Bill was head boy and Charlie captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal, because they did it first. You never get anything new, either with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, and Percy's old rat. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat grey rat, which was asleep. His name's Scabbers. He's really useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl from my dad for being made a prefect, but they couldn't. I got Scabbers instead. Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he'd said too much, but he was staring out to the window. Harry couldn't think there was anything wrong about not being able to afford an owl. After all, he'd never had any money in his life until a month ago, and he told Ron so about having to wear Dudley's old clothes, and he never got a proper birthday present. This seemed to cheer Ron up, until Hagrid told me. I didn't know anything about being a wizard or my parents or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name, said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. I'd have thought you of all people. I'm not trying to be brave or anything saying the name. Said Harry, I just never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn, I bet, he added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him about lately. I bet I'm the worst in the class. You won't be. There's loads of people who come from Muggle families. They learn quickly enough. While they had been talking, the train had carried them out of London, and they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. At around 12:30, there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled lady slid back their door and said, "Anything off the trolley, dears?" Harry, who hadn't had any breakfast, leapt to his feet, but Ron's ears went pink again, and he muttered he'd brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He'd never had any money for sweets with the Dursleys, and now he had pockets rattling with gold and silver. He was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But the woman didn't have any Mars bars. What she had were Bertie Bott's every flavoured beans, Drubel's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things that Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze nuts. Harry stared at Harry as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and tipped it onto an empty seat. Hungry, are you? Starving, said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pasty. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches in there. He pulled them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef. I'll swap you for one of these," said Harry, holding up a pasty. "Go on." You don't want this, it's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, the 5 of us. Go on, have a pasty," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or, indeed, anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling, sitting there with Ron, eating their way through all of Harry's pasties and cakes. "What are these?" Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. "They're not really frogs, are they?" He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him. "No," said Ron, "but see what the card is. I'm missing a gripper." "What?" "Oh, of course, you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them, to collect. Famous witches and wizards. I've got about 500, but I haven't got a gripper or Ptolemy." Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses and had a long crooked nose and flowing silver hair, beard, and moustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore," said Harry. "Don't tell me you've never heard of Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog? I might get a gripper, thanks." Harry turned over his card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered many of the greatest Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and ten-pin bowling. Harry turned the card over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. "He's gone. Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day," said Ron. "He'll be back." "No, I've got more Morgana again. I've got about 6 of her. Do you want it? You can start collecting." Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. "Help yourself," said Harry. "But in the Muggle world, people just stay put in photos." "Do they? What, they don't move at all?" Ron sounded amazed. "Weird." Harry stared as Dumbledore slided back into the picture and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at the famous witches and wizards on the card. But Ron couldn't keep his eyes off them. But soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcross, Alberic Grenion, Circe, Paracelsus, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the druidess Clinoda, who was scratching her nose, to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavoured beans. "You want to be careful with those," Ron warned Harry. "When they say every flavour, they mean every flavour. You know, you can get all the ordinary ones, like chocolate, peppermint, and marmalade, but you can get spinach, liver, and tripe. George reckons he had a bogey flavoured one once." Ron picked up a green bean. He looked at it carefully and bit into the corner. "Blah, see? Sprouts." They had a good time eating every flavoured beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked beans, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, and sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble the end of a funny grey one wouldn't touch, which turned out to be pepper. The countryside, now flying past the window, was becoming wilder. Neat fields had gone, and there were now woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door and the round-faced boy Harry had passed on the platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry, have you seen my Toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "I lost him. He keeps getting away from me." "He'll turn up," said the boy. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him," he left. "Don't know why he's so bothered. If I'd brought a Toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could. Mind you, if I brought Scabbers, so I can't talk." The rat was still snoozing in Ron's lap. "He might have died and you wouldn't know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday to make him look more interesting, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you." He was rummaging around in the trunk and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places, and something white was glittering at the end. Unicorn hairs nearly poking out. Anyway, he had just raised his wand when the compartment door slid open. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a sort of bossy voice, with lots of bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She looked at the wand in his hand. "Oh, you doing magic? Let's see it then." She sat down. Ron looked taken aback. Alright." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed grey and fast asleep. "You sure that's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not a very good one, is it? I've tried a few simple spells just for practice, and it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family is magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learnt all of our set books off by heart. Of course, I hope it'll be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" She said this all very fast. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learnt all the set books off by heart either. "I'm Ron Weasley," Ron muttered. "Harry Potter," said Harry. "Are you really?" said Hermione. "I know all about you, of course. I've got a few extra books for background reading. And you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of dark arts, and great wizarding events of the 20th century. "Am I?" said Harry, feeling dazed. "Goodness, didn't you know? I found out everything I could if I would have found out everything if I could if it was me," said Hermione. "Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. Sounds far by the best." I hear Dumbledore himself was one, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we'd better go and look for Neville's Toad. You two had better change. I expect we'll be there soon. And she left, taking the toadless boy with her. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it, said Ron. He threw his wand back in the trunk. Stupid spell. George gave it to me. I bet he knew it was dud. What house are your brothers in? Said Harry. Gryffindor, said Ron. Gloom seemed to be settling in on him again. Mum and Dad were in it too. I don't know, what they'll say if I'm not, but I suppose, Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. But imagine if they put me in Slytherin. Was that the house you know who was in? Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking depressed. I think the ends of Scabbers' whiskers are a bit lighter, said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses. So what do your eldest brothers do now they've left? Harry's wondering what Wizard did once they'd finished school. Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts, said Ron. Did you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet, but I don't suppose you'd get that with the Muggles. Someone tried to rob a high-security vault. Really? What happened to them? Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. Dad said it must have been a powerful dark wizard trying to get around Gringotts, but they don't think they took anything. That's odd. Because everyone gets scared when there's something like this happens, in case you know who's behind it. Harry turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you know who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but it had to be a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. What's your Quidditch team? Ron asked. I don't know any, Harry confessed. What? Ron looked dumbfounded. Oh, you wait, it's the best game in the world. And he was off, explaining all about the 4 balls, the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he had been to with his brothers, and the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the money. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game when the compartment door opened. And yet again, but it wasn't Neville the toadless boy or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered. Harry recognised the middle one. It was the pale boy from Madame Malcolm's shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he had shown back in Diagon Alley. Is it true? He said. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So, it's you, is it? Yes, said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thick-set and looked extremely mean. Standing either side of the pale boy, they looked like bodyguards. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, said the pale boy carelessly, noticing when Harry was looking. My name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all about the Weasleys. Have red hair, freckles, more children than they can afford. Turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out that some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks, he said coolly. Draco didn't go red, but a pink tinge appeared in his cheeks. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter, he said slowly. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know it was good for them. You'll hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and he'll rub off on you. Both Hagrid and Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair. Say that again, he said. Unless you're going to fight us. Oh, you're going to fight us, are you? Malfoy sneered. Unless you get out, said Harry, more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron. Don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food. You still seem to have one. Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he so much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger. Sharp little teeth dug deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers round and round, howling when Scabbers finally flew off and hit the window. All 3 of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the streets, or perhaps they'd heard footsteps, because a second later Hermione Granger came in. What has been going on? She said, looking at the sweets all over the floor, and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. I think he's been knocked out, Ron said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers. No, I don't believe it. He's gone back to sleep. And so he had. You've met Malfoy before? Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. I've heard about his family, said Ron darkly. They were some of the first to come back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He said Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side. He turned to Hermione. Can we help you with something? You'd better hurry up and put your robes on. I've been up the front to ask the driver, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in terrible trouble before, we even get there. Scabbers has been fighting, not us, said Ron, scowling at us. Would you mind leaving us while we change? All right, I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly, racing up and down the corridors, said Hermione in a stiff voice. You've got dirt on your nose. Did you know? Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train seemed to be slowing a bit. Harry and Ron took off their jackets and pulled on their long black robes. Ron's was a bit short for him. You could see his trainers underneath. A voice echoed through the train. We'll be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train. It'll be taken care of separately. Harry's stomach lurched with nerves, and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First years over here. All right there, Harry. Hagrid's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. Go on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me. Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark, either side of them, that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed once or twice. You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sec, Hagrid called over his shoulder. Just around this bend here. There was a loud ooh. The narrow path opened suddenly onto the edge of the great black lake, perched atop a high mountain on the other side. Its sparkling windows in the starry sky was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. No more than 4 to a boat, said Hagrid, calling, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting on the water. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione. Everyone in? Shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. Right then, forward! And the fleet of little boats moved off at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up the castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. Heads down, yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads and little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy, which hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbour, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Oi, you there, is this your toad? Said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out. Trevor, cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass, right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone stairs and crowded round the oak front door. Everyone here? You there? Still got your toad? Hagrid raised his giant fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door.